All right. All right. A very warm welcome to everyone. It's wonderful to be with you all here today in our wonderful panel, Facke Canon, Aesthetic Visions Beyond the System. I would like to specifically thank Alina and Perel for bringing us here together today. And I would actually like to start us off with a wonderful quote from Perel, which is the initiation for our collective conversation today. Perel said in a discussion at Kampnagel in October 2020, and I quote, also, I feel like Facke Canon. I don't think we need to invite or accept others into a canon. I think actually we do not need a canon. We need some other form that isn't even about that word inclusion, which I fucking hate. There needs to be something that is not a canon and that is created by people who have been excluded. I'm just putting it out there like, what could it be? I don't know. But I want to assert the idea of domination, assert the idea that inclusion could mean everybody is happy inside of the same structure, meaning the canon. Because I actually think that any marginalized person knows that survival means working outside of the system. Thank you so very much for this, dear Perel, and I would like to warmly welcome in our discussion today, Nadia Ufuyati Al-Azhar, welcome. Schwarzrund, welcome. And Alexandrina Hemsley, welcome. And you, Perel. So in our collective conversation today, we will address the already excluding notions of what counts as knowledge, how that knowledge can be differently held, how margins and centers are constructed, and therefore also offer themselves to be deconstructed, and how other forms of working with each other could possibly result in complicities which cater more to a collective interdependence, and of course, how we would celebrate that power. On that notion, I would like to introduce Schwarzrund. A very warm welcome, Schwarzrund. They came to Bremen as a Black German Dominican at the age of 3 and have lived in Berlin for over a decade. On schwarzrund.de and in various magazines, they write about multidimensional realities of life inside and outside of communities. They also negotiate this on stage as a speaker and poet. They studied cultural studies and gender studies in their bachelor's and master's degrees. Their research focuses on queer Black interventions in Africa's Latinx identities. The 2016 Afro-queer novel Biscaya, 2020 Afro-queer novel Quasi at Ach.je Verlag, and they can be celebrated at Schwarzrund everywhere, and have also done a podcast with German and English about disability that is called rampereich.de. Dear Schwarzrund, I would like to ask you to please describe yourself with 3 descriptors of your choice, please.
Hi everyone, I hope the sound is working. Yes, great. Okay, so I'm Schwarzrund, and 3 describers that I think are kind of helpful is that I'm a light-skinned Black person in the Dominican racial system and in the German racial system. I'm fat and I'm identifying as femme, so this is also, for me at least, influencing my look.
Thank you very, very much, Schwarzrund. Thank you very much for this. I would like then to move over to Alexandrina Hemsley. A very warm welcome to you. Alexandrina's creative practice lands in the fluid spaces of dance, choreography, writing, facilitating, and advocacy. Their interests are both enduring and in expansive states of flux, or just in connection, relation to the processes within life and within living. They turn towards the sensorial, the bodily, the multiple subject positions of self and self in intimate relation to self and other selves, as ways to find breath and voice amidst the unjust and inequitable. Alexandrina is associate artist at Dance Ireland and Cambridge Junction. Alexandrina has recently founded her own organization, Yewandi 103. Yewandi 103 formalizes the past 10 plus years of her work in the contemporary dance field as a choreographer, performer, writer, mentor, and educator. Yewandi 103 lives as compassionate, embodied advocacy in action through choreography, writing, production, artist support, and development of mental health discourse. Thank you very much, Alexandrina. And I would also like to ask you to please describe yourself with 3 descriptors of your choice.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Alexandrina, and 3 descriptors. Yeah, light-skinned Black person. I have an indigo wall behind me, and I'm wearing a kind of pink, soft, draped thing around my chest as a kind of like soft attitude today.
Thank you very much, Alexandrina. Thank you very much for this. So then I would like to move over to you, Nadia Ufotayeh-Al-Azhar, who was born in the Black Forest and holds a degree in journalism. She's a cultural activist, curator, production manager, journalist, presenter, and filmmaker. Oh, Nadia is disconnected right now. Well, that's a shame. On that notion, I would say, if you don't mind, Perel, then we move over to you first, and I would introduce you first to give Nadia a bit of a chance to reconnect. Perel is an interdisciplinary artist whose work is centered on disability and queerness as they relate to care, consent, sexuality, and personal and historic trauma. Utilizing choreography to examine power exchange between the artist and audience, quote, Perel is a master at timing of tension, relief, and intimacy while creating a space of learning and unlearning, unquote. Their work includes performance, installation, criticism, and curatorial projects. They often use collaboration as a platform for the exchange of disciplines, working methods, and discourses with other choreographers, composers, and visual artists. Perel asks, how do we move across space and time with respect to our collected histories? Their work has been shown for more than a decade at numerous galleries, theaters, and performance spaces internationally. Perel is currently a Disability Futures Fellow and on a Take Care residency with Kampnagel. Over to you, please, Perel, to describe yourself with 3 descriptors.
Hi, I'm Perel. I am a short, white, Ashkenazi Jewish, non-binary person with sort of sandy brown hair, and I'm wearing a bejeweled jacket. And also I'm in the sound studio at Kampnagel, which I just feel is necessary for the audience to know, to contextualize being in a space that is not my natural space to be in. But also here with the crew physically for the symposium.
Thank you very much for this, Perel. And we see you're back, Nadia. So I would go to you. Nadia Ufotayeh-Al-Azhar was born in the Black Forest and holds a degree in journalism. She's a cultural activist, curator, production manager, journalist, presenter, and filmmaker. Recent projects include the event and film series Remix, Africa in Translation, and the book publication Narrating African Futures. In 2011 to 2017, she co-directed the annual Big Sass Festival of African and African Diasporic Literatures at the University of Bayreuth. Since October 2017, she has been working as a project manager and co-director, artist director at Each One Teach One e.V. in Berlin. Here she is also responsible for the annual literature and art festival Afrolution. Since 2020, she, in her role of subdivision project director, has also been responsible for the area of interventions, and thus for the discursive and performative formats within the 5-year collaborative project, Decolonial Memory Culture in the City. Over to you, please, Nadia.
Hello, it's nice to be back, and sorry for the technical difficulties. Yes, my name is Nadia Ofuete Alazar. I'm a Black woman. I'm tall and strong, and I have dreadlocks that I've tied up, and they are sort of a mix of dark brown and sandy colored. And I'm wearing a black t-shirt and a very colorful African wax skirt, like a patchwork. And I'm holding a huge hand fan because I'm joining you from an event at the Berlin Academy of the Arts. So I went away from the plenary where there's a lot of noise, and I'm sort of hiding in the restaurant section. And so internet seemingly is not so good, but you might pick up some of the background noise because it's a huge building. So sorry, I hope this technical problem is not going to reoccur, but behind me, you hear some glasses being pushed on a trolley. Apologies. Nice to be here.
Thank you very much, Nadia. There's no need to apologize. Given that we will talk about the multiplicity of voices, I think it's good to bring even other rooms into this discursive space. So thank you very much for this. So my name is Nina. I work as a freelance journalist, writer, and poet. I am a white person with light skin with freckles. I'm also wearing a, let's say, graying undercut and a white polka dot t-shirt. And I have glasses with see-through frames on today. So that is me. Yes. So wonderful people. Thank you very, very much for all of you for being in this collective space. And thank you again to Perel and Alina for bringing us together in this collective space. And I would like to start us off with a question on how can we fathom other forms of knowledge production, which are already moving beyond established system of acknowledging what actually counts as knowledge. Schwarzrund, if you don't mind, I would like to cite one of your quotes here and would like you to start us off with this one. I quote, "However, I defy the notion that white people must always be able to understand. That's a colonial perspective about knowledge, about learning, and how these things work. And I refuse to pursue it any longer, at least not in my art." Over to you, dear Schwarzrund.
Yes, this is from an interview in Transit, and I asked you before from which quote it is because I say this a lot of times. It's a point very near and dear to my heart. And if you're not feeling super comfortable with German, there's also an article about it in COPED, which is called Wer ist Kultur, wer hat Kultur, which is also addressing the same point. And what I mean by that is comfort doesn't have to be always part of getting to know something. And I think the most easy example for that is learning languages. The way we learn languages in the westernized system is to get a byte that we can understand at that part in time. And we think that every person can understand it in the same level and time. And only when you understood point A, you can go to point B, you can go to point C. And actually for me, I can't understand point B in language learning because I can't understand grammar. I just can't. It's part of my disability. So I could never learn languages when I would follow the system. So what you say is there's one system of getting to know something, and every normal human being can learn in the system. And if you don't, then you're wrong. But that also means for artists and educators, you have to educate in the system. And I think the point where we arrived right now, or what I at least see when I give speeches and etc., is that people get very angry if I say one sentence that they don't completely fully get, or if I use a Spanish word, or if I say something like, for example, a new word that I learned is racial system, and it's super helpful for my work. So when I say there are different racial systems and I start to explain it, people already raise their hand and say, what is a racial system? You haven't explained that first. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I first say the word and then I explain it, or maybe I say something to contextualize it, or maybe you just don't get it because it's part of Black culture and you will hear it 50 times and then you get a feeling for it. Like there are so different ways to grab new words and concepts. And if you never had to do that, that means you never experienced migration. It means you never grow up in a family that is different from other families. It means that the, like, for example, German system of learning is working for you. So you're pretty able in your way of learning, and or neurotypical. So I think this idea of this is classes, this is bad education, when it comes from especially Black people, is a very easy cop-out for white people not to learn stuff. And what I then learned on top of that is that most people don't even ask for that. It's more the gatekeepers of white people who say, this book is very complicated. But then I talk to white readers and they're like, no, I loved it. I don't need the hundreds explanation of hair culture. I got that. I could Google that. I can do that myself. So I think everything is already kind of bad, but the gatekeepers make it even worse with their perspective on it. So I don't see just bad and good people in this. I see like a system of gatekeepers who say people have to learn this way, and I'm done with that. And I don't want to work in this framework with my art any longer, because I think no one is getting anything out of that except for people who write reviews, maybe for magazines, but they don't write reviews on Black books either way. So why should I care about them?
Thank you very much for this. Thank you very much for this, Schwarzgrund. I think that's a very good way to sort of start us off, that comfort doesn't also always have to be part of what you learn. And I would like to hand it over to you on this note, actually, Nadia, because I think you might have a lot to say about that.
What is the question, Nina?
The question is, I would say you have written a lot about, for example, the discursive omnipresence of the white Christian knowledge archive. You're working on a different form of knowledge transmission and knowledge and its role in empowerment with EU tools. So you can choose which entry point you would like.
Thanks, Nina. And again, thanks for having me. It's interesting that you use the word different just now when you posed the question. So there's knowledge and then there's different knowledge. And we have to be really careful because we get trapped ourselves sometimes in these notions of what is in the center and then what's at the periphery, which I completely refuse. I mean, it's not my world. You know, I was born and raised in Germany, and then I've lived in the West in different territories. So, you know, in the UK, in the United States for 6-7 years. And then I spent a lot of time in France. And really, to me, that system of centering Western archives of knowledge is similar in all these spaces that I've experienced. So obviously I'm very well acquainted, like many of us, with what you just called the Christian, what did you say? It's a Christian Western archive, I guess, or the term?
No, you called it this, the discursive omnipresence. I'm just quoting you, the discursive omnipresence of the white Christian knowledge archive.
Would you tell me also where you got that quote from?
Yes, it's from your introduction from K in brackets Erben des Kolonialismus.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, wie Rassismus aus Wörtern spricht. Okay. Yeah, that was co-authored with my colleague Susan Arndt, that book. And I think she penned that particular section but I do agree. But see, I'm not, this is not what my work and my life and my thinking is all about. I'm not centering that. I've inhabited that space. I know it. I stepped out of it. I know it intimately, and that is the thing of working also in Black contexts, which is usually, you know, my work. I'm working embedded in the thought and the histories and of communities of African descent. And so the thing is about people of African descent, they're very well acquainted with that archive, because in order to survive and in order to, well, yeah, let's just call it, in order to survive, you have to know that discourse intimately, and you are like a very woke observer. But that doesn't mean that you're centering that. So I've been thinking about knowledge production even more so now, you know, coming up to this conversation. And then obviously, often the way that we talk about knowledge is a very narrow notion of what knowledge means. I think this type of knowledge that we don't love is the very narrow Western rational thought that is being conveyed in university, in academic settings, and in maybe, you know, in the school system or something. And that is, if you look at Chakrabarty, for example, maybe you've heard about his book, you know, Provincializing Europe. I mean, that's sort of one way of being in the world and creating knowledge. And obviously also within white Western Europe, that also excludes a lot of white people, that type of, you know, so it's like heavily structured by race and gender, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously even more so vis-a-vis exclusive, vis-a-vis descendants of formerly colonized or enslaved peoples. So yeah, so what can I say? Knowledge is a lot. And I've been thinking about actually what constitutes knowledge, because we use this word as if we already already know what it means. And then there's so many ways of knowledge and creating knowledge. For me, knowledge in the first place is, I think, a very interactive process. It's about relationability, and I'm lucky enough now to sit in the Academy of the Arts, where there's an event happening called Unexpected Lessons. Yesterday, there was a conversation between Fel Winsar, the economist that you might know from Senegal, and he was in a conversation with Nana Oforiatta Ayim. She's a curator from Ghana. And so that was also about knowledge production, interesting enough, you know? And so they were also trying to figure out what constitutes knowledge, you know, what is knowledge? Besides that, all human beings have it, and all societies have it, all cultures have it, and it changes. And it changes in processes of, well, negotiation and interaction mostly. So you by yourself, I doubt whether you can really generate knowledge. I mean, you know, so I don't think I can generate knowledge if I'm just locking myself in a room. I doubt it. So there's always that interaction and that relationability, and obviously Black knowledges also are nothing stagnant. They have been, you know, and Black, as we know, Black people as such are not monolithic, you know, so there are various knowledges. The whole thing is very complex and it's very polyphonic. And that's really also what my work is all about. I'm, for now, mostly interested in the ideas, the thought, the struggles, the archiving, and the empowerment of peoples of African descent. And that by creating dialogues between people from the African continent, artists, activists, thinkers, and people in the wider global African diaspora. That's what I'm working on right now. Yep. And I think that's it for starters. I'm happy for further questions.
For starters, I love it. Thank you very, very much, Nadia. I don't know, Perel, Alexandrina, would you like to come in on this point? On the variety of points that have been raised by Schwarzrund and Nadia?
Yeah, absolutely. Like with Schwarzrund, I was really with the when you were saying, like, you know, what if, can't knowledge be a series of feelings, and can't we like journey together as we listen to one another? And when I heard you, I was imagining you in like a lecture theatre. I was like, what if the lecture theatre just listened and waited and saw how the knowledge itself emerged? And then I thought through when you're saying around, if you say a word in Spanish, and it just made me think how much othering we already place in texts, you know, like where there's always like a little asterisk, or there's like something is in italics, it's already like othered. And then I guess really listening to Nadia as well, I was thinking, what is the degree to which we assimilate, or what is the degree to which when we encounter a center, like my one is like, I just disconnect, I start like flying somewhere. But it's also troublingly reaffirmed by things like discrimination in a workplace, for example, right? Like we're told so often that we are not in the center, our needs are not seen, they're not met. And yeah, I heard recently, oh sorry, that's what I was going to say, and that we have to remember that the university is a workplace as well, right? So, you know, so if it is a workplace, then we have to commit to its like to overthrowing it, right? And there was one other thing I wanted to say. Oh yeah, I heard recently someone say something so hopeful and beautiful, and it was that they were a Black academic and they were saying the center moves where we move. And I really like this potential, because also then, well, one, there's movement, so it's dynamic, and it absolutely speaks to the Black knowledges that are multiple, multi-time, or the kind of African metaphysics of, yeah, being in past, present, and future, and the kind of non-linear relationship to center, no? Like, what if the center is just continually swelling? And yeah, I think that's it. I'm kind of like swimming around, and I've got lots more, but wait until we get there.
Thank you very much, Alexandrina. And I can see Nadia is raising her hand. Yes.
Yes, no, thank you so much, Alexandrina, for that point, because I think I omitted something, because when I was speaking, I was really speaking from a very subjective positionality of privilege. So I have the privilege to work almost exclusively in Black contexts. You know, I'm working at a large Black-led institution with about 25 colleagues of African descent. So that is a privilege, and it's very comfortable. Obviously, in my past, I've been in the system, and I've worked in the university system, for example. So obviously, I should not omit that absolutely what you just said, that being pushed to the periphery, to the margins, to the invisible, that is obviously a fact in those institutions. So I should have specified that maybe even more than I did. So I'm really speaking from a place of Black privilege.
Thank you very much for this, Nadia. Schwarzrund, yes, please.
Sorry, the raising hand function doesn't work at my Zoom. I don't know why. Yeah, I love that point, because I researched, I have a workshop series which is called Surviving White Academia, where I work with Black scholars. And for that, I research a ton. Like, I read a lot of different opinion pieces, and I'm like ripped between those different positions of, you should never be in academia, you should totally be in academia. You're like all this different points of views. And then there's always a student who asks me, like, what should I do? Am I bad for being here? Am I good for being here? What am I? And I want to quote someone, and I hope I will later post it, because I can't remember the name of the person, and it's a Black Latinx queer person. And they said, friendly reminder that you can't out-achieve trauma. It was one of the funniest, harshest, meanest tweets I ever read in my life. And under that, there were a lot of comments of other Black scholars who said, wow, that's so rude of you to say that. Like, how dare you point that out to me? Because I think that's a lie that I'm still also working on. And then I feel ashamed for working on that lie. But how could I change working on that lie just by myself? And I think that points towards not just knowledge, but also changing behavior is always informed by the system around you. and it will always like re-push its agenda in a new way, in a new like colorful, shiny way, comes around as a new lecture, and you think like, oh, this sounds good, and then you realize that it's still colonialism, just in a new dress, new makeup, new look.
Just affirming itself, yeah.
It's like,
Oh,
hi,
no,
I'm someone
honestly,
completely different. You're like, yeah, that sounds awesome, and 2 years later you realized, oh no, it was the same thing actually. And I think that's a system, but I really want to focus on that personal note of, but we still live in that. And I think the one thing that I'm willing to change about myself, and I try to give scholars on the hand, is maybe at least leave that shame part, because shame is not helpful for feeling okay-ish. I can't tell you how to change every university in the world. When I would know it, I would do it, or destroy it, or find a new wisdom. Like, all the solutions are super important, but for your life now, this day where you have to eat food and take medications and whatever you have to do, please at least don't take that shame on yourself. I mean, change stuff, but shame, you don't need that for that. And I think that's a big lesson I'm learning from this very short treat of, yeah, friendly reminder, you as a single person can't out-achieve your trauma. And I really wanted to share that, because I think it's an important point in all of this. So no one is leaving with the feeling of, yeah, you're right, I should change every university.
Thank you very much for this, Schwarzrund. Indeed, thank you very, very much for this. And Perel, I can see you. Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few things. I'm not sure if I actually have the stamina to weave together everything I've written down to lead up to what I'm saying from what everyone has said. But maybe I'll try then. But it is actually something I had mentioned to Nadia when we had our first meeting all together. And it was from what I had read of her work, in which knowledge is written about as the structure as a membrane. And it really struck me because of that corporeal metaphor that also relates to disability to me as well. And then Alexandrina had said, what if the center is continually swelling? And again, this is this corporeal metaphor. And I think having a lot of experience with swelling as a disabled person, this idea of swelling being both painful and potentially luscious at the same time. So what if that was a manifestation of knowledge? And that both of these metaphors somehow are also things that shift and change to meet what else is occurring, and are not these like solid, unmoving states of understanding and accumulation. And then how can those other ways of imagining bodies of knowledge be not a critique of a canon, but just not even engaging with that idea in the first place. And then I also that I feel that when I had said what I said at the panel that was quoted, that like to me, my survival is actually based on proliferating in these other ways and working with artists in these other ways. And then also that we could produce something that's unrecognizable to some existing form of power. And that its its validity and power rests in the fact that it's not recognizable, actually. One other thing that I had wanted to talk about is something that Schwarzgrün just talked about. And when she quoted a friend who said, "Friendly reminder that you can't out-achieve your trauma." I think in the world of disability, this is also very real, you know, all the time, and that actually disabled artists are instrumentalized in institutions and programs to represent to represent something called inspiration porn, you know, where everybody gets to see how you were able to be successful in spite of this thing, or look at how great this disabled artist can achieve or appear to fit into a non-disabled framework of value and production. So these are things that I also am thinking about all the time. And I will continue to think about colonialism just being put in a new dress with makeup in order to subsume again all of the things that are actually being fought against. That's all.
Thank you very much, Perel. Alexandrina, you wanted to come in on this one, please.
Hi, yes, so it's Alexandrina speaking. Thank you, Perel, for bringing in this swelling and I also have a kind of lived experience of swelling as pain, and then I really like that it's also luscious, like all the fluid is kind of there, like reminding us that we've gone too far. I wanted to bring in then, if knowledge is as a structure, as a membrane, then can we acknowledge the canon as vulnerable? Just as our bodies are vulnerable, just as the fluid in our bodies are vulnerable, if the canon is then fluid, it is also vulnerable. And that again counters the Western dominant narratives and white dominant narratives around like owning and possessing static forms. And then in terms of this inspiration porn, I've been really trying to think through when I'm invited into institutions to, like, you know, somehow represent or advocate. It's like they're throwing the party, but then you realize you're in the shadow of a party because other people aren't really participating in the party that is supposed to be about proposing alternative ways of doing, of living, of like saying that we exist. So it's like, yeah, I'm not down with that anymore. But like, if you're going to invite me in, you have to participate fully. You're expecting me to participate fully in your violent systems and they're causing all their harm. You need to like bridge that with me so we can work together somehow, or at least always know, right, that it's always a possibility for something to stop. Always it has to be a possibility that something can stop here, something can no longer exist here, so that the ground can like be made fertile again. But again, it's like I'm always confronted by, actually, when you enter institutions, there are people really, really invested in the status quo. And so then they're not acknowledging that there's a contradiction to invite in artists who have different realities and are trying to kind of can that reality coexist alongside the reality that the gatekeepers are forming, be that like the legal structures around the construct of race, or the policy documents in the university, the employment law, you know, there's kind of, but then at the same time, sorry, I'm also not really, I was about to ask, you know, are they willing to give it up? Maybe I don't care. Maybe again, it's like not about what they do, it's about what we do. But as has been already mentioned, we are also within the system, like we are, and so we have to somehow negotiate and somehow rearrange. Yeah.
Yes, Schwarzgrün, please.
First, my pronouns in English are they, them, not she. Perel, because you addressed me different. Yeah, I had to think about a picture because I'm getting into this whole thing of Black gardening, or also the Latinx perspective on that, of white and Black indigenous people in Middle and South America. And there is one picture that I just had in my mind, and maybe it can illustrate a little bit more practically what we were talking about, and especially you, Alexandrina. And I try not to say that with a Spanish accent, but it's very hard for me because there are a lot of opportunities in your name. And there was this big discussion about the wildfires in California. And since I think 60s, it's forbidden to burn down the forest on a regular basis, which was part of the culture, and also like just taking care of the forest from different groups of landowners who actually own the Turtle Islands. And they were forbidden of doing that. There were like really harsh punishment for burning down parts of the forest, which you actually have to do to not get this big unplanned fires. And now the government starts, like the white settler government starts to address that, and they start to do that practice again. And for me, this was a super interesting moment because they understand how soil works, because soil always gets covered, and it always wants to get covered, and it gets covered on top of each other. But they already knew that the forest itself needs kind of it needs to burn down, and we are the ones suffering under that. So the step doesn't have to be like a wide economic movement. It's like human bad, human has to leave, or human good, human owns the forest. These are the two positions. But in indigenous movements all around the world, you can also see that in Europe, it's more about like, but we are there now. That's a thing. And we, as every other human, don't like to kill ourselves as a group. So we have to acknowledge that we are taking space away. That's just what we're doing in the nature of human beings. But how can we do that to still keep the system functioning? And that's hard because there's never a good answer. There's no right answer that is morally completely perfect. And, you know, there's no moral superiority to that. Because, of course, when you burn down a part of a forest, some animals will die. Always, no matter if it's planned or not. It will change the system, but it's still, you know, like it's a negotiation that happens through thousands of years. And when you take out the pressure of being the perfect human being that is better than other human beings, you can start to see the consequences of what you did and then try to do it better next time. And sometimes this picture helps me to understand this huge discussion about how art should be, or how education should be, or is this academic and bad, or is this academic and good? It's more a negotiation. We are now in the state of human being that we are in. Let's now see how to figure it out, and we will fail and it will suck sometimes, and sometimes it will be good and we will learn stuff. And I think when we take out this high level of, for example, good black activist, or good queer activist, or good disabled activist, and start to negotiate and to appreciate our failures, there's so much more relief in that. And I think one thing that every oppressed group is need more. I want to see people breathe and like let their shoulders down and still act, because till now we have relief and not do anything, or and acting. And I think when we focus more on Latin feminist perspectives in our especially Black and disabled discourse, we can see other states of being an activist, or being an artist, or being in academics. And we don't have to say any longer, you suck because you're a professor, and you're good because you're not a professor, or something like that.
Thank you very much for this, Schwarzrund. You wanted to say something, Nadia? Yes, please.
No, I just got goosebumps. I just wanted to share that. Thank you, Schwarzrund. That is fantastic, what you just said, and really touched me and resonates with me. Also, how you started the talk initially when you said discomfort is a good thing, you know? I completely agree. I often tell that to white people who are like uncomfortable. When I say something, I'm like, good, good. It's good to be uncomfortable. And you have to stay there for a moment. I mean, we all know about this decolonize, this, that, and the other. That's like really sexy en vogue. And people are like, yeah, let's decolonize everything right away. And I'm like, whoa, let's have a look at coloniality and let's look at colonialism and and then, you know, we can think about the steps. So yes, so thank you, Schwarzhund.
Thank you very much to all of you. I must say I'm very inspired by what you have said and would like to ask you on this, what you have mentioned, Alexandrina, participate fully. Something also needs to stop here. What you have said, Schwarzhund, appreciate failures and still act. What you have said also about discomfort and staying somehow in that space. I would like to hear a bit more about our collective interdependence with others, with other living beings in your practices, please. And I don't know who of you would like to start us off on this one.
I could.
Perel, yes, wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, I already have. I mean, I think about this a lot in my research for my recent piece, Life Unworthy of Life, a queer discrypt talk show. I'm trying to find a way to engage the audience with talking about the history of what happened to disabled people during World War II here. And it's a history that has been silenced and has not in any way received the level of recognition that the Shoah has. And having grown up Jewish and facing discrimination in that, I learned so many narratives about what it means to be Jewish, many of which I reject as well. But I didn't receive any narratives about what it means to have a disabled identity. And I think it's because of the history of erasure that happens over and over again, because we're actually not meant to know ourselves, because if we were, what kind of power would we have? So when I'm doing this work, I'm thinking about all of the 70,000 disabled people who were killed during Action T4, plus about 230,000 who were exterminated afterwards in other more private forms of killing. I'm thinking about all of their voices and that overwhelming silence. And I'm thinking about how to have an interdependence with ghosts. I'm thinking about how all of their spirits can exist in the room with me when I'm speaking about it, because that's like all that we can really touch into about that history. And then I'm thinking about ways that we, that disabled people, how we can assist each other in narrativizing our experiences in ethical ways, because too often we're siloed within oppressive structures and we don't have each other. And within that, I would talk about what disabled activist Mia Mingus names as access intimacy, which is about a way that you can feel at home with people with your disability, maybe without even having to talk or to explain your needs, but how you feel safe in order to be vulnerable with people. And be assisted. And so that's also to me a form of interdependence that I aspire to create in my life and in my work. It's like an aspiration or like a place that's always not quite there that I'm working toward.
Thank you very much for this, Perel. Would one of you like to comment on this one? Schwarz-Rund, yes, please.
Yeah, first, thank you for addressing that. We just recorded an episode about T4 for the podcast Ramp Reicht, and I just felt the heaviness of the emotion, because it was definitely the hardest podcast to ever record in my life, because we also talked about Potsdam and the people who was murdered there, and how it felt like, yeah, like 100 years of history happening again, and they happen in our fear all the time, and now it proved itself to be true, and how we felt like incredibly alone in that. Me and my podcast host, who is also disabled, and how I connect, like from my little me perspective to the bigger perspective, definitely was my last research topic, which was the construction of identity in Latin America, and I fastly closed it down to Dominican Republic because I recognized that's enough for an 80-page review of that topic. And for me, the biggest thing to overcome was shame and guilt, and not my shame and guilt, but more the shame and guilt that I see from this very narrow narrative of how to be Black in the German discourse, and especially in the US American discourse, and how you have to address your Blackness and how you have to feel about your Blackness. And I was like kind of raised in the schools of how to be Black, I would say. And I'm so thankful for that, but there's also definitely tendencies in that doesn't work together, that completely do not work together with the history of Dominican Republic. And as much criticism I have about my own country, and there's a lot of that, a lot of that, I couldn't start from that point. I couldn't start to read interviews with Black Dominicans and already be in this kind of superior position of my Blackness better than your Blackness kind of thing. So I really had to like close out all this like more mainstreamish Black perspective and focus on, like, I really like rechanged what I get into, like what music I'm listening to, what tweets I'm reading, what does I feel about this, why do I feel so angry about this? Maybe there is a valid point in this. And I read a lot of Haitian thinkers. Haiti is on the same island as my home country, and read especially their perspective on the oppressive system in my country. And it was a lot of like stepping back out of this like first world perspective of my knowledge better than your knowledge, and also just get into conversations with my family. They are like pretty Christian on different levels, evangelikalisch in German, and they still love me. They know everything about me. They know I'm queer. They know I'm a Black activist. They love me, but I have so many feelings about their political standpoints. But I needed to talk to them because they were the most direct line to being Black and Dominican in different parts of the world and in the Dominican Republic. And I learned so much from that. And I think I grew in this half-year process more than in the rest of my academic time. And yeah, I'm super thankful for this reconnecting over seeing things differently. And that's something I never knew that was okay to do, that was important to do, to see each other, to hear each other, and actually understand also more about myself. And it was a very like vulnerable position to say, hey, I thought I know everything. Actually, I only know how Black people think about Blackness in the US and in Germany. Please tell me more. And yeah, that's a process that will keeps on going and really shifts my focus and my thinking. And I feel super unacknowledged and vulnerable, and it's great.
Thank you, Schwarzhorn. Thank you. Yes, Alexandrina, please.
I'm so struck by this private forms of killing. And I guess, because we know when that invisibility is like a myth, or erasure is evidences the presence of a system, and yeah, there's things around ghosts and what remains, and yeah, my work, I think since 2015, I've been really trying to center on like how to return to intimacy. So, and Perel, it was really, really great to hear, yeah, that you brought Mia Mingus into the discussion, and yeah, how to return to intimacy after or even like within the aftermath of these violences, be they autobiographical, relational, or systemic. And I guess within the enduring COVID-19 pandemic, you know, it's a question that like increases in potency in different ways according to, yeah, where geographical locations and, yeah, again, policies. And again, private forms of killing. And yeah, I'm currently researching a work that's kind of attending to how water would keep showing up in my writing, and I'm trying to move through this like fiery movement score that's centered around a kind of cycle of repair. And still, yeah, asking like what remains then in this water, turning to writers like Alexis Pauline Gumbs, and this, I'm not sure if it's true or not, but it feels true. The potential that there's like bioluminescence happening in the oceans, particularly the Middle Passage. So the elements of those we've lost in their bones, there's this potential. I mean, that they're being made visible now. Yeah, and again, using water as a way of unfixing the gaze, because I think, you know, dance school, it's all about being looked at. And I mean, it was yeah, it's quite something to overcome when you're being told that you're seen, but you know all the ways, and your body's feeling all the ways that you're not being seen. Yeah, so the piece at the moment is a kind of hopefully going to be like a CGI watery space where this like fiery dancing is going to happen. Something hopefully will land around repair, like, and writing within the repair, like you say in said Schwarzland, of like writing within the shame, like writing within the repair, knowing that that is the knowledge that we have and that we're cultivating and that passes through the generations. It's not knowledge that I will achieve in this lifetime. And I think, again, like how that is such a direct challenge to the very quick, bite-sized, like downloadable products of knowledge that capitalism and that the West are really like, that's what they're investing in. So yeah, something about slowness and catching my own like internalized racism and ableism when I'm like, no, I want it yesterday. I want my award. Where's my award?
Thank you very much for this, Alexandrina. Do you want to come in on this as well, Nadia?
I am so happy to just listen and absorb, but I can chip in again. What Schwarzrund also just said, what you said just now, is that you can actually completely disagree and still deeply love people. That is also a very complicated thing, right, in life. I like that. So you're really inviting ruptures and breaks and complications into your life and work, and I really cherish that also. Obviously, in my role as a manager, you know, I'm, you know, in an organization that's not really like, you know, my MO. But then as a curator, obviously that's a very enticing idea. But I think also, Nina, initially you started off at the intersections, or rather questions of solidarity and interacting and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I've been thinking about that. I mean, that's really crucial. If for my work and my thinking, but that is also a more recent development. And you know, just in the framework of Each One Teach One Ioto, I produced and conceptualized like an interview series on intersectionalities. That was in Black contexts. However, you know, in terms of transgressing and I don't know, having access to narratives where I know for sure that I have blind spots and no experiences. And so I don't need to say, I can just sit down and humble myself and discipline myself and just ask certain questions or give space for expression and experience. So that is something that I produced in the framework of our communities, but also in another art project that that Ioto is involved in and other civil society organizations called Decoloniale, even though I was making fun of decolonizing everything, but still it's called that. I have a sense of humor too. So, and there we actually, it's a bit complex and I don't want to bore everybody with the structures, but basically me and my sub-team are in charge of interventions, and that's discursive and performative formats. And one of these is the think tank revisions. And there at the core is the conversation about that Berlin needs a center, like a location to deal with colonialism. And then obviously to think that up and visualize it, many actors and voices should be heard and come to the table. And so it's an ongoing series that's also rotating through the cityscape and should be hosted by other actors than us or me. And now the very first one we did, and that's maybe a comment on the question you asked, I was really thinking, and then I was thinking about, okay, obviously at the focus of my work are the communities of African descent, but we are in resonance with other groups. And coloniality is a system and created a matrix that existences and experiences of many other groups. You know, so what we decided to do is not to center Black experiences around colonialism, but to knock on the doors of the neighbors first and engage with the experiences of the Jewish communities, also with veterans of the struggle for the creation of such a historic site in Berlin, sites of commemoration. And so we spoke to the Rabbi Andreas Nachama, and we spoke to the Sintica and Romnia activist Petra Rosenberg, who created such a space. And mind you, they have very different scopes, you know, in terms of, you know, what Nachama co-created, what Petra Rosenberg did. But first of all, to also give reverence and show respect to those that came before us and went through these struggles. That's always very important to me. And then also engage with members of the younger generations. And we went into conversation with members of the Asian communities in Germany, the Muslim communities, the Sintica and Romnia communities, and obviously representatives from queer feminist movements. And in that case, we did not have a representative of conversations around body and disability. And that is something that obviously has to happen. So I would like to get your addresses. Schwarzrund, I have yours. Perel, I need yours, because this is really important, and that is the struggle that is really going to push, but that's going to make a difference. You know, if we start to really connect on these levels and in all humility and really co-engage, because coloniality has created like a global matrix that we are all positioned in. And so it's really important to go into interconnectedness, cross-community, and solidarity.
Thank you very much, Nadia. And I can see the hands being raised immediately. Perel and then Schwarzrund, please.
Yeah, well, okay. From listening to what Alexandrina was talking about this new work, and about the writing of Alexis Pauline Gumbs, and I wanted to also be able to talk about the way that I have been influenced by the work of Saidiya Hartman as well, and that it's complex to me to want to be ethical about how to work across forms of oppression without also then working with material in an oppressive way as well, you know, and that that Hartman's work to be able to construct a fabulation of narratives that have been lost to the middle passage. It is a reference that does help me in thinking about the loss of disabled voices, and also to be able to even reflect on diaspora and diasporic forms of knowledge and of speaking and of telling story. That is something that is deeply a part of the way I was raised and taught to think of Jewish thinking and writing. And also a lot of Jewish thinking and writing is always seen as criticism of some dominant voice. And it's never actually given any kind of power at the same time. And this is something that came up in this panel in which I was quoted in having an exchange with Max Cholek, who will speak in a panel next or later on. Like, what is it? How do we ethically then seek to like raise the awareness of Jewish thinkers and writers in a way that isn't about being indoctrinated into the very thing that has oppressed and killed them? And then also in different places in the world, being an Ashkenazi Jew is being white. And so then what does it mean for me to be able to ethically work with these narratives or fabulations of a narrative, knowing that I am accountable to that structure of privilege? So I wanted to just put that all out there to you all. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Perel. Thank you. Shasrund, you also raised your hand earlier. Over to you, please.
I have so many points in my head. I try to make it as short as possible. Okay, let's try this. The first impulse I had is Perel said, Perel, sorry. Should stop trying to say everything in Spanish. Perel, which is an English pronunciation, talked about this idea of how to navigate archives, how to navigate knowledge, how to navigate, and then you use the word complexity, and that's like a word that is like, oh, to me, because I think we addressed stuff, including ourselves, actually. So like I did this to myself, like me complex, bad, me complex, complex, so you can oppress me because me complex. And I don't like the system of idea because actually me not complex. There's a lot of people like me around the world. So it's a very like oppressive thought to think that there is something complex about just being alive in your whatever you are. And I definitely try to overcome that, which is not easy. But I think we have this like, and I mean, we as people who interact with archives and knowledge always try like, we have 10 knowledges and then we try to find the 2 most important knowledge and then we transport them in a way that everyone can understand. That's again, a very easy way to handle archives. And when we overcome this idea of like, I would say clean knowledge, clean archive, the true archive, which is a problem in the Black perspective, we can just address where the archive is from. And then our art will be overdone maybe in 2 years. Maybe I say, oh, that thing you did, Perel, was great 2 years ago. Now it's not. And there will be new art. And that's, again, I think that's what I learned from cultural thinkers who I read, who said like there's this like hyper focusization in the Western of I have to do something that works 500 years from now. And it actually doesn't. It probably won't, and that's totally fine. And we can burn a part of the forest down. It will help the forest in general. Like that's why I love this metaphor so much, because when we get in this vulnerable space of like transparent intervention, like I use this source now, and in the year 2020, this is super revolutionary, and that's the reason why, ABC. Then when another person reads the text 20 years later, can get where you're coming from, but can also say, yeah, but now, nah. And it's not so much a you bad, you're good thing. It's more like we can understand where things are happening. And so for me, it's like this transpiration about intervention is something that is getting forgotten a lot of times because we try to make the perfect intervention or the perfect art or the perfect different piece of something. And I have to think about Fazia a lot about all your comments. I thought about which person is bringing everything together. And for me, in my religion, it would be like which ghost is right now very present. It's like knocking on the door and says like, hey, let me talk. It definitely would be Fazia Jansen, who was like, hey, I'm not complex. I survived the NS time. I was a singer. I loved singing and I sang. And I was an activist against classism, against racism, but me not complex. Me just Fazia Jansen. Stop addressing me as a complex, untold, invisible something. And you get like, it's not a criticism of you, it's also a criticism of me, because I tend to do that. It's like, actually we are not complex. Society tells us that something is complex, but we don't have to. We can even there already say like, nah, me not complex. And yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I hope I made it short.
Thank you very much, Schwarzrund. Yes, wonderfully so, wonderfully so. Alexandrina, you raised your hand, and then we need to unfortunately start wrapping our wonderful conversation up a little bit. Over to you, please.
Just really briefly, I think this touches on something so important that, if we're not complex, we're not unknowable. We can be known. And so we can be, again, this thing of intimacy. If intimacy can be about knowing ourselves, knowing each other, it's like, it's just really important. It's just really important, isn't it? We're not complex. We are knowable. Stop trying to not get to know us and our knowledges.
Thank you very much for this. I think, wow, in such a short period of time, you have touched upon so many issues. I think, we talked about who came before us, acknowledging who has come before us. We've talked about access, intimacy, and vulnerable spaces and how we need to be transparent about them. We have talked about inviting ruptures and breaks, multiplicities, multi-temporalities, I would say multi-localities, how we can create complicities in that and focus on our interconnectedness and interdependence on and with one another and other living beings. And also, beautifully so, I think you all highlighted how we can celebrate this power and how the center moves where we move. You said that, Alexandrina, and I think that is beautiful. So thank you very, very much to all of you for your inspirations, plurality again, and the polyphony that we were able to listen to today. I also was tasked to announce that we have at 15:15 starting the virtual post-canonical book fair that I invite all of you to Also, it will be very, very interesting. You can find the link for this in the Vimeo stream in the event description. And at 15:15 CET today, there will be the dialogical keynote, Dispossessing the Canon, Classism in the Culture Industry by Francis Seck and Daniela Dröscher. For today, Alina, would you still like to say something? Have I forgotten something? Please help me.
No, it's fine.
No. All right. Thank you very, very much to all of you again for sharing this space. And I look forward to hearing more about your work and the future collective inspirations and complicities that we will hopefully see emerging from this. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.